Hello, good morning to you, Mr. Ifeanyi, and thanks for choosing to join us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's important to note that we hope to have a smooth internet connectivity whilst we discuss this. Otherwise, the essence of having you join virtually will be a typical reflection of the quality of the services we enjoy in the country this morning. And not to advertise your particular internet provider, a lot of Nigerians have groaned over what is our actual internet reality. At the start of the year, a lot of uproar by Nigerians following the approval by the NCC of a 50% tariff increment in part of the services provided by the Telcoms. And all through the year, the FCCPC has received a number of complaints by Nigerians saying that what we recharge is not exactly what we enjoy in terms of quality and even the concept of unlimited data. As an expert in the field, can you paint a true picture of Nigerians' internet reality for the average Nigerian who might not be able to acquire the likes of StarTimes, Starlinks, and other high-grade internet providers?
Okay, thank you very much. The fact is that our reality as it stands right now is things are progressing nicely, although slowly. Because we're in an age where internet is the new oil. This statement is not new to anybody. And in reality, data is the new oil. We have a lot of services, a huge chunk of our lives and our careers, moving online. We have a lot of these days we have a lot of online schools. People are currently doing first degree, second degree, and all that online. People are um, doctors are consulting with their clients online. We have there are lots of business partners I haven't met before because they've been doing businesses online. There are people who are currently importing chunks of products from China and they've never been to China. They've never met their suppliers physically. Everything is being conducted online. So internet has become a huge part of our lives, and it's something that we cannot shy away from. But when we look at our current reality, as someone who is in the field, I will tell you for a fact that we are better than where we were last year, and this is why I said so. I think I was when NTC gave that permission for the telcos to hike their prices by 50%. I was on this I was on your channel, your station, and we did an interview about it. And for me, I felt it was I said and I know that it was a move in the right direction, and a move in the right direction because when you look at the cost of providing this service, right? Providing internet service is not cheap anywhere in the world, and especially in Nigeria, where there are lots of unnecessarily costs, right, to running a business. There's no business person that you would meet today that would not complain about the harsh business environment in Nigeria. And it's not different from these telcos. They are doing business in the same business environment that is harsh for every other person. Now let's look at the cost elements, right? To provide internet service to your phone or to your home. These telcos have to import equipment, and these equipment are imported in foreign currencies. What's our exchange rate? And then you'll also look at the fact that they need 24 hours electricity supply. There cannot be 5 minutes downtime on any tower or on any of their installations. Do you have 24 hours electricity in Nigeria? And then what is the cost of diesel today? What is the cost of petrol in the market? And then you look at, you say, okay, go solar. All the solar equipment, the batteries, the panels, everything has to be imported. And then you're running back to the unfavorable foreign exchange, right? Everything is high. And then you also look at the fact that When these guys do their installations, probably install fiber, and then there's a road construction. Do you know that most times road constructions destroy these installations and then they have to go back to do maintenance? I remember we were the company I was working with at some time was managing the emergency communication center in Katsina, and then there was a road construction. That road construction affected the quality of service in Katsina, affected the quality of service in Kano, and I think maybe Sokoto or so. So these are some of the challenges that they face. And then sometimes there's vandalization. So, and these are businesses, right, that are set up to make profit. They are not NGOs, they are set up to make profit. So if you look at the cost elements, it justified the permission of NCC to say increase your tariff by 50%. And even after that increase by 50%, you also find out that Nigeria has one of the cheapest data globally, right? When you look at the cost of 1 gig in Israel, the cost of 1 gig is cheaper in Israel, 0.12. In Pakistan, is cheaper. In Nigeria, it's about 0.
Mr. Ifeanyi, I hear you when you're doing the cost analysis, but before we get into cost analysis, it's important to consider Nigeria's national broadband penetration. Most of these countries you're looking to compare us with have a way better broadband penetration. We're told that in Nigeria, investments to the tune of 2.1 trillion naira were made to increase our broadband penetration to about 70%, whereas it is still lingering almost marginally below 50% now. There are some hinterland areas and hard-to-reach areas you go to, and you cannot even get 2G or 3G network. So before we go into the cost analysis, let's get your thoughts on falling behind a projected national broadband penetration.
Well, we just had these telcos increase the cost of their service. Like I said, in the past years, there were not a lot of profits. Say 7 years backwards, they made a lot of profits and then there were lots of installations. But as the cost of running their services began to increase, there was not a lot of profit. And I can guarantee you that due to that fact, the penetration decreased drastically. But when you look at between last year, between the half Q2 last year and today, there's been about 2% increase in our penetration. And if you look around you, maybe where you live or where your office live, MTN currently is installing fiber massively across the nation. MTN just bought IHS, right? IHS, the company that has most of these telecom installations, the towers, and all of that. So all of this, in as much as there's been a recent hike, let's give it a couple of years, the penetration will keep increasing because you don't expect that the services will increase overnight just because there's been a hike. The hike in price will take a while for us to begin to see the results. Yes, I understand that our penetration is underwhelming. There are places where you go, you can't even browse. You can't even make calls, talk more of browsing. It's underwhelming, but these guys have just increased the cost of their services. So let's give them some time, right, to be able to do installations and all of that. But then we can't shy away from the fact that the telcos also have a portion of their blame, in all of this, because they tell you you're purchasing unlimited data. I think this falls back to the first question that you asked. They tell you that you're purchasing unlimited data, and then after a while, you are barely able to browse. And what I will say happens is it's something they call fair use, right? You purchase internet at the beginning of the month, and then they tell you it's unlimited. And then sometime within the month, as things progresses, you've used over 80 gig of internet. They reduce your internet speeds drastically, right? They do so that you do not exhaust, you do not use so much. In as much as they have told you that it's unlimited, they do so, and then your speed becomes so slow that you literally cannot do anything with the internet, even though you still have access, internet access. So the problem that I think we have is poor marketing, right? Or they are not being transparent with their marketing, and it's something that the telcos need to look into. They need to be transparent with their marketing. At some point, they need to let you know, in as much as this is what you're buying, um, this is how it goes. And the Nigerian regulator, NCC, also needs to play a role in all of this. They need to be able to ensure that they protect the rights of the consumers. But if it's in terms of penetration, just give it, say, 2 years, the penetration will grow massively. Like I said, within 2 quarters, we've seen 2% penetration. So if you give it 2 years, I believe that the penetration will increase drastically, in as much as these guys are now having much more money to reinvest into installations and importation of equipment.
Projections I find quite interesting, and permit me to also make reference to another data. In 2024, we're told that despite substantial investments in Nigeria and other parts of Africa, only 38% of our population was online, which is in stark contrast to the global average of 68%. Now, these data were captured by the International Telecommunication Union, and it caused worry because it will bring us back to this concept that our internet is more affordable or cheaper as compared to other internet available in the world. Take 1 gigabyte of data, for instance, which costs on the average 525 naira, depending on the Telcom subscriber you're looking to buy from. Even if you're buying it at that rate, and we're told that just 38% of our population in Nigeria and other parts of Africa are online as against the global average of 68%, do you think this in itself is a disservice to the quality of internet we are given?
What I think, you talked about an investment, right? Investments do not just begin to show profits or begin to show results immediately. And I think I've mentioned a couple of times that we just need to give these investments time. The penetration will happen, it will keep growing. And I believe that if we give within the next 3 years, the penetration will increase. Where I see a disservice, and also I see a gradual increase in the quality of service. It's not so noticeable, but there's a gradual increase in the quality of service. And it falls back to the Nigerian government to protect the rights of the consumers. Because, like you rightly said, the quality of service is not what we expect. So it falls back to the Nigerian government to protect the rights of the consumers, and then we also need to give the telcos time to widen their reach. And then there are also challenges that these guys also face when it comes to the penetration of broadband across Africa and across the nation.
Now, very interesting point you raised
Okay.
there, particularly as it falls on the government in terms of its responsibility to protect Nigerians.
Yeah.
It's also the challenge, which I believe you can relate with, our income under the concept of the minimum wage, 70,000 naira. And I don't know how much data you consume in a month, but if we're to be very honest, some of the data packages Nigerians are sold takes at least 35 to 40% of that minimum wage for you to stay online all through a month. And I don't know if the argument should be back on the government to improve the wages of Nigerians to be able to have even more disposable income with which they can afford data, or should there be certain cost of living allowances that have data as a subsidized consumption for the Nigerian workers? And this is even when you look at those that are captured under the formal sector where we can gauge their wages. What do you make in terms of this argument, sir?
Okay, what I think is it still falls back on the government. Like I said earlier, these telcos are businesses, right, that are set up to make profits. They are shareholders, that are people that are expecting to receive profits. So they will not sell their services based on the average earnings of Nigerians, because Nigerians are also looking for quality service, and quality service will cost some money. So it still boils down to the government. The government needs to do more. $45 as $45 per month. That's 70. That's about 70,000 naira. $45 is about 70,000 naira. That's too low. That's too low in any part of the world, and I think that should be one of the lowest globally. So it still falls down on the government. It still falls back to the economy.
Now, let's also give some kudos to the government, because I looked at some of the initiatives to provide for better internet services across our 774 local government areas. And it's the concept of the project 774 LG Connectivity, which focuses on bridging the digital divide in Nigeria across local governments through the Nigecomstat VSAT technology to provide reliable internet across Nigeria. I'd like your honest appraisal of that project. How do you rate its implementation and operationality?
For now, I don't think there's much data as regards implementation. But if it's something that they would, if the government would properly implement that project, right, it will be so helpful. It will be so helpful. But then the challenge that we've always had is, this is a service, and Nigecomsat is government owned. And we know that whenever a government owned institution goes into providing such kind of services, there are always problems. So there has to be some level of infusion of the private sector for that service to for the service to truly mature and be helpful to Nigerians. But like we see with what Elon Musk is doing with Starlinks, providing internet using satellite. It's a big win. It's a big win, although that in itself has its own challenges. But if Natcomsat can get it right, the easiest way and the fastest way to provide internet service to the rural areas is through the satellites. But then the problem is, how well will they get it? Because depending on the government to be able to provide this service, I don't think it will work. We've seen the government embark on projects like this over the years, and nothing happens.
Now, according to current data as well, we know we're dubbed one of the most populous nations in Africa, with a population of well over 220 million Nigerians. And when we look at out of that figure, how many of them are internet subscriber, we're told that between 141 to 145 internet subscribers are domiciled in Nigeria. This brings us to the future in terms of projections on what we can do with these numbers, because the numbers are looking good. And even for profit-driven telecommunication operators, the profit margins should be good if we can strike the balance in terms of affordability in our cost margins. How do you think Nigeria can harness these numbers in such projections?
Sorry, can you take that again?
My question was on the numbers. We're told our population is well over 220 million Nigerians, out of which about 141 to 145 are internet subscribers. If we have this strength in numbers, do you think it serves as a better bargaining chip in terms of projections as to how viable our internet market is, and what we can do in bringing more investors in a bid to, say, decentralize the market, so that we can have even more affordable prices and more profit margins for those who play in the sector?
Of course, sure. It's a very good plus for us. Seeing the number of people, the number of internet penetration that we have, internet subscribers that we do have, it's a very huge percentage. Looking at 140 as against 220 million Nigerians that we have, and you also look at the fact that we're largely a young population, and the internet is the people who play around the internet are young people. So it's a very good plus, and it's something that should attract a lot of foreign investments. But then, I'm sorry, I'm still going to point back to the government. Then the government has to make the business environment very, very friendly. It has to make the business environment very friendly to actually attract this foreign investment. Because right now, it's looking like we don't have we don't have too much players, and then we have few SMEs, right, trying to get into the industry, but then it's almost looking like they are being strangulated by the big boys in the industry. So we need heavy investment that will cause a lot of competition. That in itself can drive down the prices.
Exactly what I was thinking whilst I posed that question. But even a closer look at our internet consumption by generation, and when I say internet consumption by generation, it's the concept of the type of internet connectivity we use. You had earlier alluded to the fact that there are some places you get to even make calls is difficult. 89% thereabouts of the internet we consume in Nigeria is between 2G and 4G. 3G in some instances, and this is basically even in the urban areas.
Urban
How do we
areas, yeah.
break into the new generation markets? Because we see other nations, the likes of the Asian tigers, largely consuming 5G. Do you think that we can have sufficient investments in infrastructures that would support such a consumption?
Yeah, I think we can. And here's why I say so. We have, like I think I did mention earlier, that MTN purchased IHS. IHS has a huge number. MTN purchased a huge number of stakes. Sorry, in IHS, and IHS owns over 60% of the telecom infrastructures and installations across Africa. Now, why that is good news is it gives MTN the speed, right, to roll out internet across Nigeria, even to the rural areas, because now they have this infrastructure. They're not going to be paying IHS rent for a lot of this infrastructure. It's going to be so easy for MTN, right, to break into these underserved and unserved areas across Nigeria. And then because of the lower cost of or the reduced cost of delivering this service, because now they're no longer paying IHS. They used to pay IHS about over 2 point something billion naira, right, annually, for their services. But because this cost will now be put into deployment and increasing their reach, it will be faster. So we'll have a situation where a lot of areas that currently use 2G will be upgraded to 4G in a couple of years. But then why this is a problem is we're seeing MTN moving faster than the competitors. So we might get to a point where there will be some level of monopoly. And when there's monopoly, first MTN might crash down prices to kick competitors out of business, and then after competitors are out of business, we might now begin to see that monopoly, and then we might see a hike in price. So if we're talking about better services, providing services, probably fiber, 5G, 4G, yes, that will happen. And I see MTN leading that journey. But then there's still a need for foreign investment. And if we will have foreign investment, the government has a lot to play in that. But MTN is doing a good job, and MTN will take us to that point in the nearest future.
Now, it's also important to note some of the competition in that regard, particularly with those who rely on direct connectivity to satellites, as against having the broadband as provided by the likes of MTN and Co. In your expertise, how do you see this defining the new market? Because a lot of persons are tilting more towards the satellite providers, which are in the likes of the Starlinks and Co.
I think Starlinks is a very good provider, but then the initial investments in Starlinks, it's steep. It's pretty high. I've forgotten how much you have to pay for the installation and the equipment and everything. But then when you compare it with you going to purchase an MTN 5G or an Airtel 5G router, or just buying a small router, the cost is you can't compare the cost. Although the internet speed that Starlinks will give you is higher, So we'll see a situation where people who can afford Starlinks will always go for Starlinks. People who can afford Starlinks will always go for Starlinks, which is satellite. But people who can't afford it, it's just about affordability. But in terms of superior service, I think I'll give it to Starlinks. But then we're not having fiber to home, fiber to buildings, which is also very fast. Which is also very fast. So you we see a situation where the normal telcos that we know, the MTNs and the Airtels are moving towards fiber, they're moving towards 5G. So the competition is growing, the competition is getting better, and this competition is good for the space.
Now, why I asked is sometime last year there was a reported fiber cable cut that interrupted connectivity across Nigeria.
Yeah.
And at that time, a lot of internet subscribers realized that our options were indeed limited with the ones we relied on, which for a couple of days there was no internet connectivity available on. I know Nigeria has, franchise of some of these companies because the likes of MTN are a South African company, but we have the Nigerian franchise. What does this say for future investments in that regard? Some that can, would I say, withstand those fiber cuts if it were the case?
I think the issue we had with that fiber cut was that fiber cut was an undersea fiber cut, right? It happened with the fiber that brings internet into the country, and it was something that affected everybody. It was something that affected everybody. So the alternative to that is satellite. So in as much as we have Starlinks, I think the best thing that we could have, the best thing that could happen to us is if we have investment, private investment in the satellite space, private companies partnering with Nightcomsat to be able to provide internet using satellite, so that um, we have these. We're not just focusing only on internet using wired internet. So we also have the satellite. That competition and having those options will help us a lot. But at the end of the day, that fiber that cuts, right, is something that can happen to any nation. It's not just a Nigerian thing. It's an undersea fiber cut that's it is the fiber that provides internet, that a lot of all our telcos, right, connect to that fiber. It wasn't something particular. It's something that can happen anywhere in the world.
Now, overboard for every business operator, they would tell you that the cost of operations in the last 2 years have skyrocketed based on alternative energy. A lot of people now have to rely on backup generators owing to a frequent collapse of our national grid. The telecom subscribers and operators are not left out in this category. A lot of them have to run their cell towers on these backup generators, thereby even pushing the costs of running such sectors even higher. In the face of this reality, are there any hopes of alternative energy in that regard? Can we explore other means of running these cell towers to reduce the cost of operations and thereby the transmitted cost to the end users?
Right now, the only energy sources that we have is, if you're not using the national grid, it's either you're using diesel or you're using solar powered electricity. And when you go to some of these installations, they have this solar powered, they have the inverters, they have the solars. But then when you look at the initial cost of installing inverters and solars, it's not a child's play. It's really high. The initial cost is really high. So I think we might have a situation where a lot of these telcos or a lot of these towers will begin to implement inverters and solars being powered by solar energy. That will also help. That will also help in the operational expenses for these people, and then it will have a ripple effect on the cost of internet. It will bring it down a little bit or maybe drastically. But at the end of the day, we also need to look at the fact that the initial installation cost for these for solar systems is really high. Is really high. And another thing we also need to look at is vandalization and theft, right? A lot of we have these installations in a lot of this we have a lot of these solar installations in most towers, right? But then the theft and vandalization also is a problem that we need to look at. I think we also need to look at the fact we need to grow to a point where these telecom installations will now be seen as critical national infrastructure, and then they are well protected, because at the end of the day, these infrastructures are the things that will help us achieve the digital economy that we're pushing for. Even when you look at our security apparatus, they also need this telecom infrastructure to be able to share intelligence and all of that. So we need these infrastructures need to be well protected, not just by the telcos, also by the government. Without this vandalization, the operational cost will be reduced, and they will also have they will also have the confidence to install some of these solar and inverter systems.
This point on vandalization you just raised is a very brilliant one, considering the number of vandalization even to our power installations across the country witnessed within the last 12 months. And more so in the future of driving the country towards a more digital-based economy, where even starting from the conduct of exams, most exams now are computer-based test examinations. How best do you think the government can prioritize future investments in this sector, owing to where we intend to get to as the goal?
Okay. The what like I've said, it's a situation where the government needs to also provide security for a lot of this infrastructure, because data is with in fact data has become life, right? The world has become a global village, and for us to compete globally, we need internet, we need broadband to be able to compete globally. So the government needs to see these telecom installations, even the power installations, they need to see it not just as private installations. They also need to play a role in protecting these installations. Where I live, I think it was last week, we heard that some people came and stole some things in our transformer, and then we didn't have electricity for some days, and then it was resolved. So we'll keep having these issues will keep drawing us backwards. And when you look at right now, we have a lot of people who work remotely, right? This is one of the huge gains of of um of the internet. We have a lot of people who work remotely. I have a team. We work remotely, and most of our clients are not in the country. Whenever there is internet issue, it takes us back. And we've had people who have been in interviews for remote jobs, and then just a little glitch in internet, they lost the job. Not because they're not good enough, but because Nigeria happened to them. A glitch in internet. So I think we cannot overemphasize the need for the government to play a role, for the government to source for foreign investment, for the government to protect telecom and energy infrastructures across the country.
Mr. Ifeanyi, it would also be important to note that in such occurrences where people are shortchanged in some way owing to downtimes in internet provision, I know over time there have been cases filed with the FCCPC on compensations due in that regard. Do you think in terms of regulatory oversight, there can be some sort of remedy for Nigerians who experience such an unfortunate circumstance?
Of course, the regulatory agencies have a lot to play, and I've mentioned it a lot of times within our short time having this conversation, that the regulation agencies have a lot to play. They need to protect the customers, because sometimes one of the problem is lack of communication, right? You will have these telcos know, okay, there will be downtime in their services within a certain period of time, and they do not communicate properly. And within that period, within that window, somebody makes some losses because of that downtime, and nothing happens. So the government needs to play a very key role when it comes to internet, and the Nigerian Communications Commission needs to play a very key role in protecting the customers. Even if there are ways of compensating the customer for some of these losses, what are these? What? How do the consumers, right, participate in such kind of compensations? There needs to be awareness. There needs to be communication from these regulatory bodies to say this and this and this. These are your rights as consumers. You have the rights to this, and if you're not giving the proper service that you deserve, this and this and this are the compensations, and then the telcos in themselves need to communicate properly to customers, especially as regards to this is the service we're giving you. If we say we'll say we're giving you unlimited, there might be a time within the month that the speed will drop. There needs to be clear communication of all the terms of of these services, and the government has to play a key role to drive these people to ensure that they communicate properly.
Now, one of the last layers one would also think logical enough to add in terms of protecting telecom installations and infrastructure in a fast developing or evolving society like ours, where different construction sites spring up every now and again, is the fact that most telco providers need to be notified of possible constructions in those areas to avoid any vandalization to previously laid optical fiber cable within the vicinity. What would you propose as the best way going forward to be able to accommodate such rapid development without disturbance to previously laid internet infrastructure in the area?
I think it's one thing that has to be done is the construction companies, especially when we have the ministries that are giving out the contracts to these construction companies. They have to inform them that okay, these are fibers, this is a fiber route, because these fiber routes, they are maps, right? They have their maps of our fiber routes, and these construction companies needs to be made, they need to be brought accountable whenever they destroy this fiber. They need to be made to pay, because I think there was a time I was discussing with an institution in Lafia, Nasarawa State. It's an educational institution owned by the state government. They used to have internet, right? And then when road construction came, they destroyed the entire fiber, and then that school no longer has internet connectivity. These construction companies need to be held accountable whenever they destroy internet, whenever they destroy these installations, because this the maintenance, right, of these damaged installations will build up to the cost of internet, and then it's the end users that would pay for it. So they have to be held accountable. That's the best way. Or there has to be this relationship, right, where the telcos need to probably when there's a construction, the telcos need to have people on ground to be able to protect their installations. But I think the easiest way is to hold the construction companies accountable for their damages.
Now, let's talk more about your personal story and interest into why you chose to be an active player in this industry. Is it based on the lucrativeness in terms of profit margins? Would you advise anyone who is looking to have a startup in this sector to actively invest in, and why should they be looking at this sector as one that will be viable enough to give them returns on investment?
Oh my goodness, the telecom industry is very, very profitable. It's a very profitable industry. But then anybody who is going into the industry has to be very calculative, because we have a lot of big sharks, right, in the industry, and if you play within their interest, of course, the big sharks will swallow you. Let's say, for instance, around me, there are fiber installations, organization. There's these small organizations that have fiber installations, and the cost of their installation is about 70 to 90,000 naira, and the monthly renewals is about 30 to 40,000 naira. And then you have the likes of MTN that will install for you for free and give you the router for free. So who would you pick? Would you pick the small guy who is billing you 70,000 naira to install, or you pick the big guy who is going to install for you for free, and then his monthly renewals are cheaper? So, but it's very profitable. So the best thing that people would do, especially smaller players, is to focus on the unserved and underserved communities, right? Provide these services to unserved and underserved community. But at the end of the day, the government needs to still encourage these people to be able to do such services, because for you to provide such services, you need licenses from the Nigerian Communications Commission. Are these licenses readily available? Even if when they are available, how well is the pop is how well are the business community aware that this license is available? How well are they insensitized to go into the industry? But if it's for profitability, it's very profitable, but you just have to play outside the interest of the big boys.
Well, I'm also is also in terms of the availability of capital from our commercial banks for prospective players who might not have the financial muscle, as it were, to actively involve without having to take these loans. Are there certain banks or commercial hubs where this capital is available and you advise Nigerians with willing interest to seek?
Well, I'm not so aware of such institutions providing such services, but I think that we've had situations where in the tech sector, especially in the fintech sector, we've had a lot of foreign investment. So people who would want to go into the sector should also look for ways to get some of these foreign investments. I think there was a time that somebody was organizing this. This is a very privileged information that somebody was trying to organize with one of the government institutions, organize kind of a conference, right, in South Africa, where where private foreign investors, will come into the telecom sector, and it was a massive one. Um, they were pushing for it, but at the end of the day, things didn't pan out well, especially from the government side. So I've been mentioning the government. So there's still a need for the government to ensure that these investments come in, because they were already partnering with the private sector. I think the South African government was playing its own part, but then the Nigerian government went to be silent. So there's a need for the Nigerian government, who has a very huge role to play if these investments will have to come into the country.
And lastly, before I let you go, we keep reiterating the role of the Nigerian government. And quite interestingly, I think some time ago, I saw this piece in terms of the right of way charges, which is part of the levies to be paid by telecommunication operators who are looking to dig to install optical fiber cable. Statutorily, they're supposed to pay, I think it's 145 naira per meter, but they also lamented that in some states, they are forced to pay as much as 9,000 naira per meter before proceeding to dig to install their optical fiber cables. They've also thanked the state governments in states like Ekiti and Niger State for waiving such right-of-way charges. But overarchingly, do you think that the governments can come to a consensus on such waivers to encourage more installations across the country?
I think because these fees are being charged by the states. It's not by the federal government. So I think the federal government will probably have to have a conversation with the state governors around this, because at the end of the day, once these installations are successful, it has a ripple effect on the economy. So that money that you're charging them, that is making them not install, at the end of the day, if you give them the right to install this thing at no cost, it will improve your economy in the long run. The governors who are giving zero right of way, right? They're not fools. They know what they're doing. and they're doing it for the betterment of their people. And we also have a challenge where the Telcom, if an organization, of licensed telecom operators in Nigeria, they came up with a report that these telcos pay about 50 different taxes and fees from federal government, state government to the local government level. They pay 50 every year. So you see why it's not just the fault of the telcos that our penetration is low. The government has a huge blame for this. By the time you charge them for the right of way, and then you're charging them for 50 or 49 other taxes and fees and payments, of course, it will slow down the rate of installations and then reduce the number of our internet subscribers. The government has a very huge role to play in all of this.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ifayinze, for taking our time to join us on the discussions on Nigeria's internet reality and with the hopes of affordable internet and improved broadband penetration across the country. We appreciate you and wish you the best of the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Have a wonderful day.